Welcome all to this session today about architecting your network for this AI-driven manufacturing world that we're in. We're going to divide today up into kind of three distinct parts, the why, the what, and the how. So first, it's going to be about, why is this important and why now? What's Cisco seeing that makes now the time for our customers? What are other customers in the industry seeing that they're doing, and why are they doing it, right? The what. When we say architecting and re-architecting the network, what do we even mean specifically? And AI ready, what are we talking about when we say AI ready? And finally, the how, right? Getting started on so many things is always the hard part. And so how are folks getting started, and what should others do to do that? But let's start out with a quick Slido poll. So you should see a pop out in your WebEx client on the one side that allows you to answer this question. If you don't, please scan the QR code that you see and pull it up in a browser. And so question one is just, where are you? Where's your organization currently in its AI journey, right? Where are you on this journey to AI-driven manufacturing? And while we look at the results, or while we collect your results, let's get into some introductions to the panelists today. So first, Arno from Keurig Dr Pepper.
Good morning, everybody who's attending. My name is Arno Tyson. I am a senior principal engineer at Keurig Dr Pepper, focusing on automation and controls and process. Originally from the Netherlands, currently in the USA for about 30 years. Reside in South Florida, been doing about 40 years in the IoT industry, about 25 years in carbonated beverage, and about 12 in coffee. Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. Brian from Cisco.
Yeah, pleasure to virtually get to talk with everyone. I am leading our technical marketing teams for our industrial IoT business unit, as well as our validated designs, where we're really, packaging up, full solutions to enable the next generation of manufacturing. So look forward to the discussion, Dave.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Brian. And Chantel from ARC.
Greetings, everyone. Chantel Polsonetti, Vice President from ARC Advisory Group. My coverage area includes industrial network infrastructure and industrial edge. I have over 40 years in the industry, mostly as an analyst, but I did start out in die-cast metal manufacturing and injection molded plastics.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chantel. And, let's get right into it, right? So, look, we are seeing this massive push towards AI in manufacturing. And, according to this recent survey that Cisco did on kind of the state of industrial AI, it's amazing to me that, wow, why did that advance? That 59% of our manufacturers are actually deploying AI at scale. And 85% are actually expecting returns in just 2 years. It's such a quick return on investment that's being expected. So, Chantel, from your research, what are manufacturers embarking on their own journey, paying attention to, right? And how are they ensuring success? And, why is the network such a hidden bottleneck, it seems like, to a lot of these AI initiatives?
Well, David, I wanted to start with, when we work with customers, we try to basically position the technology as a means to an end. And as this slide, which reflects our Q4 2025 customer survey with over 500 respondents, it's sort of like whether it was automation, electrification, digital transformation, Industry 4.0, now AI-powered processes are a means of achieving core business objectives. So you can see the same themes here: reducing unplanned downtime, maximizing or optimizing asset utilization, reducing time to market, spurring innovation, and particularly in our mind in today's business environment, really instilling flexibility and resiliency to weather ongoing disruptions, like in supply chain and the workforce and geopolitical issues, et cetera. So if we move to the next slide, to these ends, we see that manufacturers are adopting emerging technologies that are really reshaping the industry and associated network requirements. So if I can speak to what we're looking at here for a second,
Sure.
you see the different technologies on the left and 3 bars associated with each one. So the top bar, as you can see on the right, is, what are people doing now? What have they already implemented, or what are they currently in the process of implementing? And then the second bar is what we're looking at for 3 years from now. So, we know that essentially folks have adopted a lot of cloud-based infrastructure, but what's really coming? And one of the main things is the software-defined industrial automation architectures. And inherent in them are these open and virtualized automation systems with the whole shop floor being virtualized. So what does that mean? We're decoupling industrial applications from specific physical devices. We're allowing control logic, visualization, and analytics to be deployed, scaled, and updated as software services as opposed to coupled hardware and software. So how does this help the customer to achieve their business objectives? Well, certainly it reduces hardware complexity, it lowers life cycle costs, and dramatically improves operational agility with the adoption of these technologies. And the thing here is these aren't, they're no longer theoretical concepts,
Right.
but they're really practical tools that manufacturers can adopt for optimization and improvement that promise to unlock really unprecedented levels of optimization and agility. So if we look at the next slide, the issue that we find is that while we're trying to implement these new technologies to achieve the stated business objectives, we're finding increasingly that the network can be the bottleneck in achieving the desired goals.
Sure.
So, as opposed to being a connectivity layer, it's really becoming a limiting factor that determines success in the overall production environment.
Mhm.
So if we look at the emerging technologies that we just spoke to, we find that these AI workloads really expose network performance limits that the legacy OT-oriented industrial networks were really never designed to meet.
Yeah.
And so we go from isolated, very functionally defined installations that can no longer handle things like the determinism, the bandwidth, the latency, scale, all the things you see here on the slide. And the bottom line is our legacy OT networks really can't support the software-defined manufacturing that so typifies where we're going. So when hardware is decoupled from the software and the functionality of formerly dedicated controllers like PLCs, motion, DCS, HMIs, and other automation equipment is virtualized, we find that the OT networks really can't, we got to back up for a second.
Okay.
So also as AI, as we know, drives deeper IT OT connectivity and connectivity from the edge to the cloud, the potential attack surface expands and security failures become business failures. I mean, security is paramount.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's probably the number one issue.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to look at things like asset visibility, micro-segmentation, and zero trust remote access in a native, automated, and enforceable installation. And we also want to speak to the fact that these AI-ready manufacturing processes require convergence. No longer can we have these IT and OT silos operating in our environment. If we do that, the data remains trapped in local domains, and I'm sure this is not anything new to anybody on this call.
That's right.
And we know that the AI insights can't be operationalized in real time, particularly if we're inferring at the edge. And if we stick with our legacy OT network architectures, the troubleshooting stays reactive and manual as opposed to predictive. Now we can move on to the next slide unless you want to speak to anything else on that. So why must these legacy networks evolve? Because they were really built for the requirements of a different era. We need support for simultaneous operational and analytic workloads and the associated massive data streams that come from all these high resolution cameras and sensors and increasingly intelligent edge devices that are feeding into our decision making. We need rapid and scalable deployment of those virtualized controlled PLCs, HMIs, edge computing platforms, and of course the associated assets and devices. And we need that at scale. We need, we have to reverse the scenario with OT networks, limited visibility and manageability, slow troubleshooting, and reduce the operational complexity and management gaps that basically proliferate throughout these isolated environments. And again, speaking to the important issue of cybersecurity, manufacturers know that fragmented cybersecurity models increase cyber risk in connected factories, whereas the modern network embeds cybersecurity, resiliency, and intelligent management by design. We need native asset visibility and observability across the OT and IT environments, along with network segmentation and built-in zero trust capabilities. Of course, as I spoke to the increasingly powerful end devices, we need to bus power many of these devices. So I'm thinking of things like high-end cameras that we use for quality, for inspection, for surveillance, and numerous incremental applications. We also need to power our wireless access points and other devices, in general that require bus power.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, it's wild to just look at kind of the evolution of requirements and the speed at which the requirements of these businesses have essentially, we're looking now at the network because our readiness survey essentially said the network now is that primary constraint really to scaling these AI applications and similar. The bandwidth requirements, the resiliency and determinism requirements have just exponentially increased, and we've got to get our arms around that. So, Brian, let's turn to you for a little bit. So, according to that survey, right, our manufacturing customers, they find things like robotics and AI vision systems, digital twins, and just the fundamental resilient and reliable wired and wireless connectivity as those critical enablers, right? Those critical enablers to be able to kind of move to this AI ready era that we're going to. So, Brian, talk a little bit about, based on your experience working with Cisco customers, what are the big shifts that you're seeing right now and Cisco is seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So our customers are telling us they're moving from smart manufacturing as being the key paradigm really to the next evolution, which is the software-defined, AI-driven manufacturing. And as you and Chantal are talking about, we don't want the network, they don't want the network to be a constraint in moving in that direction. But where they're heading to is really interesting, because if you think about AI, there's a lot of buzz about AI that we see, but most of the data for AI is going to come from the operational spaces, from the plants, from the manufacturing. And what we're seeing is automation is the big driver of productivity around AI. It's really combining automation with AI and mobility in some cases that's really going to drive that next level of productivity in the plants. And of course, underpinning that are the machine vision systems. And so our customers are seeing the machine vision systems just scale exponentially with more and more of the 1 gig cameras, which of course are moving even in the future to 10 gig. And that's driving the need for the network is one of the big trends that it used to be a kind of a sleepy network, 100 meg of throughput. Now it needs to be a gig, or a gig needs to be 10 gig. They're also wanting to power these cameras and many of the AI, more sensors and so forth, with power over the network itself or with power over Ethernet. So that's another big trend. And that's just fundamentally transforming as you start to not only put in more and more vision system cameras, but network them so that you can train them better, do the learning, it centrally manage these cameras centrally versus trying to do everything with 100 cameras that are not actually connected. That's again 10xing the bandwidth that's coming on the network. And then the second big trend is really around virtualization, which is very interesting because it used to be that we were virtualizing compute at the edge and HMIs, but now even more of the real-time applications are being virtualized, and there's a need for a virtualization platform and capability that can virtualize all of these devices. And instead of having hundreds or thousands of PCs on the plant floor that each are running a separate use case or application, centralize that. And it could be in the factory server room. And we have one customer that has it, maybe 5 kilometers away from the factory in a data center. And the key is on the network now, how do you have that pipe where it's near zero latency? We're able to basically have an L2 tunnel. So it acts like that PLC might be in the factory server room, but it's going to act like it's right there.
It acts like it's right there.
Yeah, and that's a major shift. A third shift is mobility. I have one customer that just this year, they say they're deploying 5,000 across all their plants, mobile robots of all shapes and sizes. And mobility is already a bottleneck in these plants. And so the new innovations that we're bringing in, how do you have wireless Wi-Fi that's scalable, but also that has ultra reliable near zero latency for these mobile machines and robots and AGVs and AMRs that are going to just proliferate before we even get to the future with Optimus or whatever. But that near zero latency mobility, very key. We'll talk about how we're enabling that, I think, later. And then that's also, I'll just name one fourth element, which is industrial security. And that's, again, the critical foundation. I think I have one slide on that, in the old world, we relied on air gapping these environments. But now that you're moving the data to AI systems, the cloud, you're doing more predictive analytics, that's really driving the productivity and the overall equipment effectiveness in the plants. Well, the air gapping doesn't work. Just having a hard shell, like a soft middle but a hard shell exterior with firewalls doesn't work. So we're seeing that every manufacturing company, it's increasingly urgent to do at least two things. And I say it's increasingly urgent because we're seeing exponentially growing number of attacks, but also the severity of the attacks in terms of taking plants offline. And AI is going to make it even worse in terms of both severity and frequency of those attacks. So visibility is the number one thing that we're seeing needs to be deployed and is being deployed, so that you can't secure what you can't see in that soft middle. But that's also not enough. You've got to move to segmentation because the attacks are going to come in. We can't stop them, but how do you block them from spreading like wildfire horizontally through all the machines?
It's going to happen. So how do you make sure
it's going to happen?
Bad? Yeah.
So segmentation to be able to contain malware, contain those threats is really essential, and I think that needs to be the priority in the security journey this year. So those are the big trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I think Chantel even echoed kind of the fact that, look, we've got to layer these capabilities into the network because we're still going to have 20-year-old devices out there that are potentially unpatchable, and no one wants to touch the daggone things anyway, right? If it's running and it's working, don't touch it. And yeah, that exponential increase of data from vision systems and similar, manufacturing networks have traditionally looked fairly the same for a long time. And then there's just this hockey sticking of data as is pushing these networks in ways that we never saw before inside of a traditional plant environment.
Exactly. And that's why you have to have the security built into the network. Essentially in the AI era, the network is becoming the nervous system, the connective tissue.
It is. And the first and last line of defense in a lot of cases if the asset's legacy. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. So Arno, maybe over to you for a bit. So describe a little bit more about kind of what you do at Keurig Dr Pepper, your role there.
Yeah, gladly, gladly. Uh, Very interesting to hear the stories and like where we're going in this industry, right? And everything that's being said, we'll get back into some of these things later, but it echoes exactly what I see all day, every day. So today, my role is senior principal engineer. But what I do is today I describe it more as connectivity engineer. Uh, I,
Yeah.
I'm an automation engineer by trade, and I used to program PLCs and HMIs and SCADA systems. But in today's world, for our company, I am almost have a full-time job in picking out solutions to connect A to B. And like everybody's been saying today, right, the amount of devices that I'm asked to connect and the amount of data to be able to connect and the frequency that we connect. Like you
Right.
said, David, right? We used to maybe look at a thermometer once a day. Now we want a trend, and I want to see every second. Right? So exactly that nervous system, that nervous network, it is starting to break down, and we see that. We see that. So the things that me and our team handle are things like MES integration, quality management, performance management, downtime collection, OEE. But we're definitely moving into, so we also control remote access. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, but we're definitely moving into things like digital twin. Uh, just got about 20,000 new coworkers last week. And I learned that we have several of those are full-time LLM, or I should say, AI or
Engineers.
machine learning
Yeah.
engineers, right?
Yeah.
So we have active solutions for center lighting, batch optimization, roast optimization, those kind of things, all actively deployed.
Yeah, awesome, Arno. So building kind of on all of that shift that you've been seeing so fast, when we look at like what compels organizations to change, there's always some kind of breaking point. So like what was that? Like what were the breaking point or breaking points that really made you realize that going back to the discussion we just had, that you had to upgrade this existing network that you had, right?
Yeah, exactly. And not all of it, right? And we'll get to that in a little bit when we
Sure.
get to the what and the how. But this is more about the why. So why did we start this? So we had a lot of new misses. We had network issues going out. We had traffic not making it, and all kind of things. And what it ultimately drove to, and everybody's been saying it, and I echo this even internally and externally, multiple times a day. It's about visibility, 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 visibility. If you can't see it, you don't know what's going on. And so that was realized. We realized that we needed to strengthen our network and get a better view of what we have. We're in food and bev, right? KDP. So it's an M&A driven business. You inherit whatever stuff every year. And so how do you deal with that? And so it starts with visibility, documenting topologies, networking, IP schemas, etc. Um, and then, so what we ran into, like Brian was hinting upon that, yes, and Chantel also, convergence is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
like I said, there is so many differences between IT and OT. It may both be Ethernet, and we may both use the same cable or fiber, right? But the traffic and the characterizations of the traffic between IT and OT are so different that it takes time for these organizations that used to be siloed now have to work together to even learn to speak the same language,
Yeah,
right?
culture change takes
Actually,
so
same
long.
thing.
Yep.
Well, absolutely. But even definition. So what's real time in IT and what's real time in OT? It's a completely
Right.
different definition,
Totally different
right?
definitions.
Completely. And so all our stuff, we DHCP and OT. I mean, I've seen it, but
No.
actually no, right? So
Right.
so again, we have thousands of devices with almost no payload, but they need to be there all day, right? So for us, resilience is more than right. There's different priorities when you lay out your network, and then with that, that drives those priorities drive that you lay out your network possibly different in OT than you would in IT, right? So it is indeed a convergence trajectory, and it requires cooperation between two silos. Okay, a little bit more on that. So this is one thing that we did here. This concept that we laid out is it increases visibility and it creates microsegmentation. A little bit more about that later. But what we do here, instead of on the left, the more traditional method of, yeah, we use a PLC and we have a machine network and we have a plant network. And we keep those, not air gapped, but we have a Rockwell backplane. CIP traffic can converge to that backplane, but that's it, right? So I always say if you have a flow meter or anything with an internet page or that you may want to configure or see, then you cannot get that at if that's on the orange side of the network. So we moved to what we're now doing, and basically what it uses, it's a L2 NAT configuration that we put inside a Cisco switch, and we really converge. Let's use the word again, right? The machine network and the factory network into one, and this is a true convergence. This is not like let's work together. No, this is one cable that has both our traffic. What saves the day here is L2 NAT. You keep everything on the inside of the network. It can be whatever the machine vendor wants it to be, 192, like they built every other machine. Also don't have to worry about multicast traffic. That L2 NAT, and it's a managed switch, it will stop all undesirable traffic. I also don't have to expose all the inside network to the plant. That's why we use L2 NAT. Setting up a network right now, I have for every machine center, I reserve 10 addresses. So they have a room of like put 10 things in their NAT. This helps us tremendously. Gaining visibility. You see the pictures look almost alike. But on the left side, if I have a network break, a IP conflict, whatever it may be, and you have any monitoring solution in the green side of the network, you will never know because the physical network is not exposed. Right? On the right-hand side, we expose the physical network, but not the logical network. We choose out of the logical network the things that are important for us in manufacturing, typically PLC, HMI, maybe, I don't know, I'm doing one right now with a VideoJet printer and an NIR device that we need to the outside. So I'll put those in the NAT, right? And everything else stays below, but I can still see it. I can detect breaks, and this is really driving productivity for us. Visibility, and the same thing in the cybersecurity team, right? Because I have an inside and outside network, the NAT table, unless that traffic comes from where we say it is allowed to come from, you cannot get out of that network, or you cannot go to everything unless it's listed in the NAT table. So it builds you a piece of microsegmentation, helps our security profile, and those are all benefits. And we're deploying this as we speak right now.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we thank you for those that responded to the poll. Let's talk about that a little bit. So interesting, right? Just to give everybody sort of an idea, looks like about half of you are haven't really begun that journey. But another quarter of you are kind of in the planning stages into this AI journey, and some of you are about 15% are at the pilot stage, and about 15% said kind of mature AI enabled, which is awesome. So we speed up a little bit because we're getting a little behind. So let's get a little bit into the what, Arno. So explain a little bit about kind of the practical steps that you took to affect change, right? And we always joke, people, process, technology. People's actually the hard part. You can't make people change. They've got to kind of do it on their own. So talk a little bit about how kind of KDP did that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right, there's too many scenarios that we dive into the tech piece, right, and look at the shiny objects. But if you don't bring the people the tools, so we definitely found that the same way. So besides upskilling or expanding our network, we're definitely also upskilling our workforce, and we're deploying more tools, right, to make that visibility. Our networking is getting more complex, so we need more complex tools, and we need more skills. So what are we practically doing? We have another team at KDP that I'm not a part of, but I work very closely with. It is our obsolescence team, and so I give input to that team, and one of those inputs, for instance, as an example, that team has instructions from our side of the fence. If you see an EMBT card, replace it. No questions asked. right? Still works, but it's going to be proactively replace it. Again, build and strengthen that network every time you can. So we are building, instead of the traditional IT network team, OT network team, I am flat against that. I think you need to have a network team. And that network team,
Tech team. Yep.
one tech team that needs to be trusted, right? And there shouldn't have people that in there that shouldn't be in there, and they need to understand. So it also takes a piece of training. Like I said, there's a language barrier, right? If you bring the best IT support people into OT, that doesn't mean they immediately, right, get it all, right? I mean, case in point, P2P clock, right? You don't deal with that in enterprise. So, right? We're using L2NAT as explained, again, to bring that visibility that we didn't have on the left, right? We have drives fail and it takes an hour to figure out, oh, wait, it was a bad Ethernet cable, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not monitoring it. We can't see it.
No visibility.
Yeah, exactly. Increased security posture, right? We already have segmented OT. We have DMZ, IDMZ, firewalls, we have VLANs, and now we're adding this micro segmentation that's still on the screen here, that even add another layer of, indeed, reducing the blast radius, right? I mean, it's
so critical.
sad that that's our solution today, but right. But that's kind of where we're at today. So that's pretty awesome. And then we move into tools, right? So we also, that's where I think AI is going to play a big role. Right, Cisco is rolling out some tools to do some agentic AI stuff with your network, right? And I think that is also, as I said, it's getting more complex. It is getting harder, and it is different people, right? It is no longer the network engineer at 2 o'clock. It's an EMT, right? That person does not know how to read or write CLI. So that's kind of where we ended up with.
Yeah, thanks, Arno. So back to Chantel, you heard what Arno at KDP is doing. What kind of advice are you giving your clients on this front?
Well, David and Arno, so with the core business objectives and the requirements of the enabling technologies that we've both spoken to in mind, we have essentially a laundry list, and certainly putting together an RFP even extends beyond this. But the overall thrust of our messaging is to really elevate that OT network to a strategic asset, which I certainly heard Arno speak to. Yeah. And what does that mean? Well, it means treat it as a core enabler of AI, virtualization, software-defined architectures, and digital transformation, and not just as the connectivity layer that we're so used to. So in doing that, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. So an AI-assisted network management scenario that Arno mentioned, like with Cisco's agentic AI ops, for the OT technician, we find that that's a great mechanism for sort of insulating the OT tech from the intricacies of the IT-oriented network management. And where we see a lot of, what you guys are doing with agentic AI, others are doing with co-pilots, really, those are areas that are gaining traction to insulate OT from that IT complexity. We know that we need to define clear data and AI requirements. So when we're speaking to AI use cases like Brian mentioned and Arno mentioned, machine vision, digital twins, predictive maintenance, mobile robots, we need to use these to determine our bandwidth, latency, determinism, resilience, and data flow requirements. We also, resiliency is really the name of the game now, because we don't know what's going to happen. And certainly with Arno, with his M&A activities, you never know what's going to be coming, right?
Sure.
So we want to make sure that the network can scale readily and rapidly as new devices, applications, and production capabilities, and even in Arno's case, new businesses are added. We want to make sure, increasingly, because we're dealing with on-prem, we always want to have an on-prem capability, and we want to design the network to support edge computing that's close to the assets that are being controlled and managed and visualized, right? So that way we can enable local AI inference and real-time decision-making rather than having to rely on that cloud to shop floor kind of connectivity. We also, we mentioned before about something that's kind of new in terms of the bus-powered end devices. Brian spoke to, going from 1 gig cameras to 10 gig cameras, machine vision, wireless access points. We need that up to, right now it's like 90 watts availability of PoE, of power over Ethernet. But we want to make sure that capability is in our network. And, really two themes that I've heard everybody speak to today, that I really think are important are the convergence one and the security one. So we need to embed that cybersecurity into the network. So many automation suppliers, automation customers have an automation supplier and then a separate cybersecurity supplier, and they're trying to bolt it together. But we need to have embedded capabilities. I really appreciated Brian's comments about, getting that secure OT environment. And so what does that mean? We have to implement a cyber native network that's got that OT visibility, microsegmentation, and that zero trust access. And beyond that, I would also recommend the use of the proven validated architectures, because they reduce risk. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. And they improve interoperability, they accelerate implementation, and they really align the network what it is. And then I spoke to the enabling IT/OT collaboration or partnership and convergence. And that's really a message that we try to, really emphasize with our customers is, if it's not here, it's coming. And I want to just speak to Arno's comment about speaking the same language, whether it's what does real time mean, what does segmentation mean, I think that comment was spot on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's wild to watch kind of the evolution of organizations over the last 10 to 15 years. And various companies have tried different things to get IT and OT to get along a little bit more, right? We joke, IT's from Mars, OT's from Venus, or flip the two if that's your preferred kind of. But we're really moving to a world where now that the network is so critical in manufacturing, these teams have got to be collaborating, figuring out how to get along, because it's an organizational imperative now. So before we get kind of into the how with Brian, let's we'll kick off the other Slido poll, and that is, how would you kind of rate your current network infrastructure's ability to handle this kind of new world? And we'll talk to it in a little bit. So Brian, Chantel mentioned kind of, look, legacy networks can act as this speed limit or this brake because they were designed for, I think she said, like a different era, right? And so you heard from Arno, he highlighted some key characteristics of kind of KDP's AI-ready network in his mind. And of course, according to our survey, right, the top concerns that are limiting AI adoption with our customers are certainly cybersecurity, because everybody wants to try and contain the blast radius and you have legacy devices out there. We need more talent. We've got to be upskilling talent, like Arno said, and we have the same results from our survey that says the same thing. Oh, by the way, part of this organizational thing is to be sharing those resources. Let's have one tech team. But then also technology integration challenges. That's one of the other things that really came out of our survey. So talk a little bit about, look, Cisco's got this ruggedized industrial IoT portfolio. And so how can it help, Brian, with that flexible, secure, high bandwidth, AI ready network that we know that our customers need to architect?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you've heard like what you were just talking about, and then Chantal mentioned, and Arno, there's so many moving pieces here and so many ingredients. And then you also have IT and OT that need to collaborate around this. So how do you actually move forward? And so
Right.
we're really trying to bring to the table a couple things. One is an end-to-end portfolio that's going to be that foundation, and whatever that you need, whether it's the industrial switching, the security built into the network, the mobility, whether it's wireless or Wi-Fi cellular, everything. And we're not, ideological about it has to be this way or that way, but it's really the best in class network. And I have to cite one of Chantal's reports from earlier last year that we've become the market share leader for industrial Ethernet switching, and we continue to gain share, and it's really because we're providing that whole platform, and that brings simplicity because it's going to be future proof, and it's going to have all the best of the IT capabilities and all the best of the OT capabilities built into the network. But then the second thing is we're trying to bring the recipe to the table. So not just the ingredients, but how do you put it all together? Chantal mentioned the proven industry validated architectures. So that's real engineering. And we're taking all of our products, we're taking the leading control system vendors and other applications, we're validating with a real engineering team against Profinet and Ethernet IP, SIP, all the major protocols. So you're going to be in a diverse environment with most likely with multiple PLCs, multiple vendors, but it's validated to work across and be like that seamless platform that you can use across all the plants. That's a big simplification point. And then I do think the validated designs are also helpful, exactly as Chantal already covered, reduce risk and speed deployments, increase your time to value. But also I would just highlight, it's a key point of that IT and OT collaboration, because and part of that is just getting in the same room together and defining
Not the truth.
what's our priority use case, order pizza, and work through it.
Right.
But part of it
same room.
is also we've got this validated blueprint, and we hear from customers over and over, like, that's it's got the best practices for IT and OT validated. So the teams can kind of align around that and drive their standard. And we continue to innovate. So it's gone from the converged network that we've been talking about, and but now in the enterprise, in the industrial automation validation and the resiliency, MRP, et cetera. But now we've also recently added machine vision system networking and how to do that, and proving that the networking works with the latency needed with the leading machine vision system providers. That includes Basler, Cognex, several of the top industrial machine vision system providers. We've also done in the last year validated designs on the control system virtualization. So how do we move to the future and it's future proof? And then another key one is, how do we do network management but for OT specifically, and make it really role-based for the OT teams to access? And then a fourth piece that we've added, and if you go to the next slide, and we're going to add more, is, and you can see Cisco.com. If you just Google IoT CBDs, Cisco, you're going to see all of the validated designs that we have. But if you go one page farther, I'll just one closing point on the validated designs. We're putting more and more around mobility, which is another key area of the wireless networks. And what we're seeing is the workers need Wi-Fi, but and that works for the Wi-Fi across the plant. But many times the AGVs or the AMRs or even specialized tooling, it needs higher reliability and lower latency, especially when you're doing roaming and handoffs. So we've built a lot of things into our access points and clients, like multi-path operation. And I won't get into all the technical details, but it's amazing to get near zero latency. And what's really amazing this year is we have in the same AP either the Wi-Fi mode, or you can turn on the ultra reliable wireless backhaul mode. So again, you have the future proofing. You deploy it and it works for everything. But then if you start needing higher performance wireless with higher throughput, longer range, lower latency, seamless handoffs, then you can turn on in the same existing AP the URWB mode and run both in parallel, all managed by Catalyst Center. So that is something we're putting more of the design guidance around. Again, how do we make it easy and give you a recipe to follow for deploying that and actually migrating to that in your plants?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I mean, those are also great. Like, as a longtime technologist, the validated designs, just giving me something that says, okay, you don't have to guess here. Stand this up in the lab and we know this is going to work, so we can then scale it. And then the concept of I feel like the idea of zero packet loss on a mobile application breaks the laws of physics, but that's what folks need. If suddenly I've got a controller on an AGV with a 64 millisecond Profinet timer timeout, and Wi-Fi like roam spec says, well, it can take up to 100 milliseconds to roam, that AGV needs constant, always on, resilient, reliable connectivity. It's just so huge for our customers. And so many customers are shifting to you said it, right? This mobile first bias. And if you're mobile first bias, you've got to have that. So look, we've got folks on the call though that are like, hey, it's working, don't touch it, but I know I need to kind of move into the future. I'm worried about deployment schedules and making it easy to deploy, and I'm worried about making it easy to run. And I hear you guys saying I need to converge IT and OT, but we're still a little bit Hatfield and the McCoys. So how is Cisco, Brian, making kind of the network easy to deploy and ultimately run on day two?
Well, I think automation is one. So we're bringing network automation to enable factory automation.
There you
And
go.
I love saying that. And
I love it.
and I think that's very important to make it simple, or when it breaks at 3 in the morning,
Yep, 2
how do you
a.m.
make it
Sunday
plug and
morning
play?
problem. Yep.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
So I think that's a key point, the validated designs, and just having that, that seamless solution. And of course, our partners are very important as well with the right expertise.
Yeah, all very true. So maybe Arno, we go back to you, right? So look, you've been in the trenches for a long time, right? You've got to have a lot of practical advice for folks. So talk a little bit about those practical steps. Like, what should people prioritize to ensure the business outcomes are ultimately, getting the support that they need, both from the network, but that, you talk about improving OEE, that you actually get there, or that we're deploying models at the edge and we actually get the results from the models that we're deploying at the edge. So give the folks on the call some practical advice.
Yeah, gladly. It's a journey, right? We may, if we're compared to some people, we're ahead. Compared to some people, we're behind. But that doesn't really matter. That's irrelevant. What I would say, if you're embarking on this journey or if you're in this journey, what I've found is that there is nobody. There's very few people, I should say. There's always somebody. There is almost nobody that has an unlimited budget, right? So to say, hey, I want to future-proof my network, there's nobody that's going to be able to do a CapEx project to go to the business and say, I need $2 million to upgrade my OT network. And they ask, what are you going to get for it? And the answer is nothing yet, but be ready for tomorrow. If you manage to get money for that, let me know, because I'd love to find out how to do that, right?
Right.
So it typically doesn't work like that. So whatever you design, and if you look back on that now, I'll gladly share it with if somebody, if they're interested. For instance, an L2NAT example, right? What it does, it makes an improvement that we can bring to the network iterative and opportunistic, right? So we have, like I said, if we touch a machine and it has an EMBT card, I'll rip it out, replace it. If I find we're going to a plant and we're doing a machine or a building overhaul, I said it at the ARC conference. How many people know what kind of cable is in their cable trays in their plant? Is
Right.
it Cat? Let's say Cat 5, but is it? Is it 6, 6E, or is it 3? Right? When was it built? I mean, think about it. Who's going to look at that? Nobody does, right? So those are things like start small, do it iterative. Again, like everybody is saying it, I'm doing it. Iterative, the CVD designs, right? Cisco has figured this out. So one, it reduces risk. Two, it saves you money. It's stuff you don't have to go sit engineer. Somebody already did that, right? And that ties to the other thing that I'm a huge proponent of. As an engineer, and definitely at the plant level, we have now, I'm not sure how many, about 50 facilities. Whatever you build, design, develop, make sure that it can be that is modular, that you don't have, that you can rinse and repeat,
Yeah.
right? And that's the same even with the collaboration piece. The collaboration piece with IT and OT we technically, we don't have an IT department anymore. We have a tech department. We really do. It's called KDP Tech. And that's where all these functions reside, right? And it doesn't mean I have to run on the same cable, but
Sure.
you have to get along. And the biggest advantage, so people ask me all the time, so the L2 NAT and all these other functions, I mean, why did I do it with the switches I'm doing it with? That reason is simple also. We have an entire KDP tech team with people that can speak networking, right? We talked about people, tools and technology. So we can either upskill a whole bunch of EMTs and automation people, or we can kind of rename the team from IT to KDP tech and use the resources that are not fully utilized anyway, right? So that's those are my things. Use the CVD. It is proven. It's figured out. So you don't have to do it. You save money and reduce risk, and do it iterative. Nobody eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Right. Right. Thank you, sir. Yeah, those were great. And I actually I love the iterative comment, because there's this concept of, to your point, I've got this big elephant and we've got to eat this elephant all at once. And oh, by the way, I can't touch things as we go along. And something simple as, if a machine's being put into maintenance mode and maintenance is doing maintenance on the machine, let's actually touch it then. And if you have one tech team and we're combining it anyway, now suddenly those teams are talking. And so, the org can follow so much of those things. Yeah. So
that's exactly what we do, right? So we do a machine overhaul, and maybe I'm not even deploying the L2 NAT yet, but while I'm in there, okay,
Right.
let's just swap the switch. I don't know what it is. I've got $2,000 on it. What's $2,000 extra on an overhaul? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I've future-proofed that machine and the piece of networking that goes with that.
Yeah.
I would
Right.
add to that, like that, I think what you're really stressing is be intentional, have a plan
Yes.
and a vision where you want to
Yes.
go.
Be
It may take
intentional.
you 6, 7 years, but then when you are making those, refreshing the controller, refreshing the line, whatever, you can move towards that plan step by step over time.
You're absolutely right, Brian. And that is, I didn't even mention that. That is exactly what we did. And that's how we got to this, right? It didn't come up in today's discussion, but we started this journey together hand in hand with Cisco. And we started with some of these concepts. And what we at that point did is we invited Cisco over to one of our sites in California, and we did a survey, right? But we think we're doing a good job. What do you think? What do we have? Did we do the right? So I have an entire report written by Cisco, evaluated our network, and we discussed that with our CISO and all the people in KV Tech, and said, well, we know, sure, there's some blue sky recommendations in there that would be lovely to have, right? But we chose otherwise due to funding. But there were some points in there that we definitely leveraged. And Brian, we used that report exactly to do that, to create that vision, right? You're going to have a true north. It's not like, oh, just buy some stuff here and there as we go, right? But the advantage of doing it iterative and opportunistic, of course, driving true north will get you there along the way without having to ask for $3 million in capital to buy switches.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, thanks everybody for the kind of insightful discussion. I mean, it's clear, right, that regardless of kind of where you're coming from, this whole transition to AI ready factories and factories ready for the next decade of change, it's no longer just about software. It's about people, it's about culture, and it's about the network. We've moved from a world where the network was nice to have, to a world where the network's critical. It's not just a dumb pipe anymore. It's a utility. A utility like power. The power goes down, and what happens? The factory stops. Well, now it's, if the network goes down, the factory stops. And so it really, we've moved to this world where it's such a critical component of a modern foundation to a factory. It's just, it's crazy, and really cool to just watch the transition. So I want to check for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And it looks like we have no questions in the Q&A panel. Awesome. So we will go, let me kick this back up, and we'll kind of close it out. So a couple things. One, a bunch of resources on the screen that you can leverage, right? We've got two of ARC's white papers. We've got that State of Industrial Manufacturing report mentioned. And so from that standpoint, let's we got about 5 minutes. Let's maybe anybody has some closing commentary before we end the call today.
Just one closing thought on my side is we've talked a lot about like nitty-gritty things for today, which is very, very important, the segmentation and the how to migrate to the future and enable AI, et cetera. I would just say that one of the things Arno mentioned earlier was the AI agentic operations, and that's kind of interesting for the future. Can we start to embed AI in the network itself to be used for that controls engineer when there's an issue? You're using a natural language query. Why is the network down? Why is this machine not working? That's going to, again, revolutionize things in terms
Yeah,
of
that
productivity
tier one
and speed of
troubleshooting person at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning where you don't know where the problem is or isn't, just to get an idea, to your point, Brian, of, hey, it's not the network. That agent said, like, looked at things, it doesn't look like it. And, you know, maybe it's even potentially wrong, but today you have no ability to tell one way or the other. And so, yeah, it's amazing.
That's exactly right, David, because it is like 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, right? Always,
Yeah.
right? You know this. And so even if that tool has a green red light and could say, is it the network or not?
Right.
Would be a huge win. Because at 2 o'clock at night, I don't have an engineer I can call like, hey, can you pick my switch?
Or is it
Can
the
you
right
turn my light
engineer?
on the port?
Yeah.
Or is it right? Or is the network card out? Or is the PLC not working? Or is the drive busted? Or I can replace a drive. I can call maintenance, but I can't, right? So that tool, we did a demo of it in front of, like, we had a little input in the voice of the customer for that tool, and it was amazing. But we did a demo with it with some people that could potentially have a benefit from it in the new factory that we're building. And everybody that saw it, that was at that level, says, I want this, I need this.
Yeah.
That's how impactful it was to those people. So the voice of the customer, David and Cisco, thank you, was well heard, and so acted upon. That was amazing. So thank you.
Mic drop comment there, Arno. Chantel, any closing
Well,
thoughts?
I just, hearing all these things, we really can't emphasize enough how quickly we're learning why and how the network is really the make or break component for scaling these AI initiatives, and how to address the challenges like we've talked about here. And what I really like about this conversation is this particular emphasis on, performance. The security is like job one, right? In our opinion, along with performance, but also this manageability piece as well as the convergence. So I really, respect the fact that these are all concepts that are part and parcel of, hey, we got to handle these AI-driven data streams.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always joke, right? When you redesign a factory or you re-architect a factory, you're not re-architecting it for this year or next year. You're re-architecting it for 10 years from now. And so if this factory is going to be around for the next decade, regardless of where you are kind of on that AI ready journey, first, second, or never, I would say no one's in the never camp for a decade out. And so you got to be looking at this stuff now. So 2 final thoughts. We're going to kick one final Slido poll up. If you want someone at Cisco to contact you, let us know. And then also the ARC forum that Arno kind of dropped a little earlier in the US. There's going to be another one in the EU in Barcelona from May 4th through the 6th. And we have a collaboration presentation on Tuesday, May 5th, where Audie is going to talk about leveraging Cisco's network as the backbone to this software-defined architecture and automated factory that they've been, now running in production on. And with that, thank you all for attending today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. Take care.